Peggy 3.
Hello and welcome to the one and only Sports Interactive Studio, the place where Football Manager is created each and every year. You'll notice that this is a shiny new office, a new space for a new game, which is exactly what we're here to talk to you about today, as I'm going to be bringing you an insight into the Football Manager 2022 headline feature set from inside the studio. Across 2 episodes, I'm going to be talking to the people behind the game, from the studio itself to figures from the wider footballing world, to explain how this year's key additions came to life, from ideas within a database to detailed game features. Here I'll be chatting with key members of the SI studio across a variety of department and game areas, beginning with none other than the studio director, the gaffer, Miles Jacobson. Miles, it's lovely to meet you in person. The last time we spoke was in the middle of a pandemic. This is a year on, of course, from FM21. Where is the company a year on? What's changed? Of course, like the world has changed a lot, but what about the company specifically?
Well, we're still in a pandemic at the moment, so we're being very careful with the pandemic because the team here are very important to us. So we are still mainly working from home. It's actually lovely being in the office today. It's such a fantastic new space and we're not in here properly at the moment. But it's meant that we've changed so much in the studio in the last year because we delivered a game during the pandemic last year in the real heat of it, which a lot of other studios weren't able to do. So many games have gone back. And we learnt a lot about pain points and pressure points last year, and it was not an easy game to release FM21. So we've changed a lot of practices in the studio for FM22, and it's meant that we were able to start working on new features a little bit earlier this year and get them to a more polished state earlier. And hopefully we're going to be delivering something brilliant for everyone in the near future.
So the future we're going to dive into in these couple of videos, and the insight's going to be fascinating for all the fans of FM22, or they will be fans of FM22.
Hope so.
Yeah, me too. But of course, you have to sort of say goodbye, I guess, to FM21. When you kind of look backwards and reflect on that as a game, what are your kind of overarching feelings on the game?
I think if you look at the play times on the game, it showed that people loved it. And that's the thing that means the most to us, when people are really getting into their games and when their saves come to life in their head, and particularly in the last year, because it has been so tough to people.
For FM22, what do you want people to think and feel?
Kind of the same. We want people to be escaping into their own fantasy world where they are a football manager, an escape from the real world, a suspension of disbelief. This year we've got a lot more of interaction and information in the game to really help that world become alive even more than it normally does. We've got the data hub and all the extra information there. And then there's even things like the value revamp changes, which are going to change the way that people do transfers inside the game. And it looks like a small change at first, but is actually quite a big thing. Plus, loads more changes as well that you'll find out more about in this video and over the next few weeks.
Absolutely, Miles. So before we get stuck into all of that detail, let's go back and take a look at how the Football Manager features process starts. I'm joined now by Jonny, the visualization director at Sports Interactive. Thank you for sitting down and having a chat with me. I'm fascinated to, first of all, understand your role and then understand the process of working through features and getting them into the game, especially FM22. So let's start off with your role. Visualization director, it's stunning to say, but what does it mean?
It's a lot of syllables, but essentially I head up the creative disciplines at SI. So that's teams across art, animation, design, UI, UX, audio, anything creative.
And so the features within the game, they change every single year, it develops, it evolves. How does kind of that come about? Because I would imagine, having sort of seen and on Twitter or YouTube or wherever it might be, there are a lot of opinions, there are a lot of ideas. How do you first of all, I mean, how many ideas are there around features for FM lying about?
Gosh, well, that's a great question. So we're very active to invite ideas and feature requests, not just from the SI team, but also from the broader FM community. And we have a live backlog of, I think it's 7,000 odd, ish ideas, and that's always being managed and being reviewed. In terms of the design process, that usually starts with Miles and myself and some of the designers will sit down, understand the priority of perhaps what aspects we'd like to see in a given cycle. And then the design team will usually I'll run an ideation session. And you can imagine that like a post-it slam. We've been doing that virtually in lockdown, of course. But on those post-it notes we'll sort of collate some of the ideas that relate to a given feature from the community and from the team. And then through a process, we'll refine that into a high-level design document, then into a full technical design document. And the goal of that document is to allow the developers and the engineers to implement that feature.
It's time to talk about one of the headline features in FM22, the Data Hub. Sounds serious, kind of is. Elliot, the junior software engineer, joins me right now, and you played a huge part in the sort of the next stage of bringing in analytics to the next level that happened in FM21 with XG. How does it go beyond that this year with the Data Hub?
So the introduction of XG and the analytics stuff we did last year was pretty big for us. We think that kind of Football Manager is quite important for how people in like the community in general view sports and like statistics. And we saw a big uptake. We saw a lot of people really liking what we did with XG. And we wanted to really push on this because we think it's important not just for the fans and not just, I don't know, for representing reality, but because of our aim to kind of make Football Manager an accurate representation of what being a manager at a football club is like. We know from conversations with football clubs, we know from kind of the perception of what football clubs are now, that these data teams and the analytics in general are very, very important for the function of modern football clubs. Like, people credit analysts in interviews, people talk about the fact that they're making these marginal gains. And we wanted to be able to push that and make sure that our users are getting a similar experience.
So what I loved when I was looking at the Data Hub was, like you say, that sort of painting of pictures that can allow you to sort of take in things quickly. So if we go on to the Data Hub, what pictures are we going to see during the game, and how can they help us? Which new elements will we see in FM22 in the Data Hub?
So we've introduced momentum, which gives you a kind of perception of the flow of a match. It might give you information about this team has been performing particularly well in these time periods. You've had a load of shots, you've had a load of touches in the final third, this sort of stuff. This gives you a way of diagnosing like match performance that's agnostic from result.
And I really like this one, by the way, because I did, people know who've ever seen me play FM, I can tinker on occasion. And so the momentum map was fantastic because I kind of made a couple of changes when I played the game and it started to go awry. And I was like, oh, okay, you can kind of learn as a player within the game that don't do that, don't make those changes, or be careful in how you make those changes. So that's what I really enjoyed from the momentum map. What other things will we see?
There's another thing obviously they've always been in the game, but we've made some improvements to pass maps. So as you talk about systems, you talk about tweaks, you'll be able to see in much more detail and much more intuitively the way that game's played out between your players. You might see, okay, my centre-backs have been circulating the ball between each other really well, but they're not getting the ball at the pitch now because there's a strong line between them. And it's just giving users more ways of diagnosing what's going wrong with their team or going really well without having to dig into like huge repositories of information they might not know about.
And with so much data in the Data Hub, some people will want to kind of look at it on face value. Some people want even more. Is that an element that you've kind of featured in this time around?
Yeah, so we've tried to make sure that we cover all bases. We've got this ask for system where users can literally ask their analysts for pieces of information. So as we've talked about the momentum map, we've talked about the pass maps, you can request these for matches. You can request your shot maps, the XG timelines you saw last year. But we've also added a few different things. So you can dig into like specific information about maybe like a metric you really care about. You care about how well your defenders are heading the ball. I'm going to ask my analyst for a graph about heading. Shows you where your players are, know straight away how well they're doing. There's also stuff like zone map information. So it breaks down the pitch and it shows you how frequently you're doing things in different areas. So it's just ways of turning existing large amounts of data into something that someone can actually learn something from and make changes, because that's what we care about. We care about users, like you say, being able to tinker, being able to learn from seeing all this information that can be quite overwhelming. We want to turn it into something intuitive.
So you now know the right information. Now it's time to talk about your team on the pitch. I'm now joined by Nick, the match producer, who deals with everything around the all-important match engine. Yeah. For those few people that don't understand the kind of breakdown, I guess, of what the match engine is, first of all, could you describe that to me?
Yeah, of course. So the match engine itself, it's a realistic simulation of football. So we're trying to simulate the game as it is with 22 players making decisions on the pitch and trying to balance that against what the real world conceives as football.
So let's talk about FM22. This year specifically, how is it moving on? There are a few elements here that I'm privy to, which is amazing, and I'd love you to explain them to me in a bit more detail. So first of all, dribbling. How has that changed in the match engine?
For the number of cycles, we've actually been working behind the scenes to bring a new animation engine to life. So we'll be debuting our new animation engine in FM22. Our old animation engine, whilst was important for our growth of improving the 3D elements of the game, we were restricted. So our old animations, they were lumped on that 2D disc. But our new animation engine gives us a lot more freedom. The players aren't restricted to the movement of the disc. They can move off of it, which is really important to get them in situations to make touches of the ball look even more realistic. So we've got this overall vision to A, make football believable and authentic, and B, to eradicate foot sliding. So that's something that we've really worked hard on this year, is that element of the player touching the ball. If you had seen it in actually previous versions of the game, the player doesn't actually touch the ball as succinctly as it does now. And that's our foundations, our new animation engines are foundations for growing going forward. But just because we've improved the visuals, we also had to improve the AI and the decision of when to dribble, when to not dribble, when to turn, for example. So they might be dribbling around a rabbit hole, might need to turn, get out of trouble, use those fine looking motion capture animations that we got for turns and dribbles and cuts to then play it backwards. So
it's so lovely to see you so excited about it. This is fantastic. Okay, let's keep moving. Let's stick with defense then. We're talking about kind of tackles and bits and pieces like that. Pressing. Pressing is, again, becoming that little bit more intelligent. Is that right?
Yeah, so we've overhauled the pressing system and added triggers, which is the most important element of like your pressing system. So within the instructions that you had in the game already, so like your line of engagement, your defensive line, where you want to show players either down the line or inside, that all links up to the angles in which the players then go and press the ball. And also, the best element of the pressing this year, for me, is that players now, based off their stamina, they have the concept of their sprint capacity. So they know when they can press, when they can't. So, just a plug and play gegenpress system is going to be a thing of the past. You really need to know that you've got the right players, so your recruitment's going to be key. You want players with obviously good stamina to fit in those systems. And also your training, your work on the pitch in the training field is going to be really important to then transition into that match environment.
I was fortunate enough to have a little go in the game yesterday. I felt it myself, my beloved QPR. We were doing well in the first half. I think we overpressed a little bit, and then the guys were struggling in the second half, and we ended up drawing that game. So the consequences there are much greater. And in terms of the stamina of the players, you spoke about it there a little bit, but the kind of, if a team is pressing too much, that's going to affect the passing and the first touch and all those elements as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's going to affect their accuracy of either what they can perform, either because we actually this cycle we've also overhauled our accuracy as well. So we've added more accuracy and inaccuracy into elements of like passing, shots, first touch. We've improved those elements because we felt like realistically we weren't simulating overhit passes very well. We weren't simulating poor first touches again to link it into our pressing. And so there's all those elements that we needed to improve. So we were like, right, let's do it all in one go. Let's improve the whole so that we can get those little intricate details.
So there's loads of different elements within the match engine which have been improved, but there's a brand new role as well in the defence. Three centre-backs has been very, very popular over the last few years, but in particular, I think, over the last 18 months. And there's a new wide centre-back role. Tell us about that.
It's going to be a really, really enjoyable role for our fans. They've been wanting this for a while. And we could have rushed it in and we could have just put in a role, but that really is never our intention. Like, we want to simulate the role accurately. And so we wanted to see it and watch it in different sort of systems and setups. And like, we've seen the evolution of the role, and like, managers have been so creative with how they've used their wide centre backs. So we've added that realism with different duties as well to suit whatever tactical style that you want to perform. But it isn't just the role itself. That role, it performs a number of duties. It attacks, so it overlaps and it underlaps. And previously in like iterations of the game, we have those instructions of underlap and overlap, but they're saved for your fullbacks, for your wing backs, for your inverted wingers, for your wingers. They're not necessarily used for your centre backs. So for us, it was about modifying those tactical instructions and making sure that we not only included the centre back in there, but like, how does your fullback or wing back move off the basis of that centre back? How does the players in front of them move? How do the players behind them, like their defensive midfielder, how does that move and how does that cover for that player? So yeah, for us, it was about the movement of the player on the ball, what they do with it, movement of them off the ball, where are they when you lose the ball? That's going to be fundamental for the whole system, and it's up to us to do a bit more education as well of how you could use that in the system, because there's going to be a lot of managers as soon as this game goes out where they're going to go, right, I want both my wide centre backs both on attack duty, and they're going to go forward. But if they don't have a DM in there, then there's going to be no cover and they're just going to get hit on the counter. So it's also about us doing it right, and this is one role that the system needs to be supported around it.
That's it for today. Great to get an insight into the changes to the match experience and the wealth of new information available in the Data Hub. We're going to go and chat some more with some other guests from within the studio and the real football world about transfer deadline day and better backroom communication thanks to revamped staff meetings, which you'll see in part 2.